Hello viewers, good evening. I welcome you all on behalf of Indian Medical College to this online class. Dear viewers, in today's session, we have our enthusiastic and energetic speaker, our beloved Dr. Meenakshi Sundari ma'am, who is from SRM Medical College with us. She is a professor from the Department of Medicine and she is having a plenty of teaching experience behind her. She will be taking a class on the topic portal hypertension today. Good evening and welcome you ma'am. It is an immense pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Viewers, if you have any doubts regarding the session, you can just type them in the comment section below and your queries will be clarified at our head at the end of the session. Thank you, ma'am. You can just start the presentation.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We'll go on with the topic portal hypertension, and we'll be discussing about one of its complications, that is variceal bleeding two in this class. Okay. Moving on. Okay. We have to know about the anatomy of the portal system. What is the portal system? Whatever the food particles and everything which is absorbed in the intestine as cannot enter into the all the food particles and everything which we eat are going to be broken down in the intestine and is going to absorbed in the intestine, and it has to, whatever the absorbed material has to go into the systemic circulation. But before entering into the systemic circulation, they have to go via the portal system. So the portal system, it includes all the veins which supply the gastrointestinal tract, which carry blood from the digestive tract, spleen, pancreas, gallbladder, and everything is taken to the liver, because liver is the major assimilating organ in our body. Whatever the broken substances like the amino acids, the fatty acids, free fatty acids, and the oligosaccharides and disaccharides are going to get assimilated into larger molecules and going to enter into the systemic circulation in the liver, and also the whatever the toxins we are going to absorb are going to be detoxified in the liver. So definitely everything has to go via the portal system into the liver, and then only it is going to enter into the IVC via the hepatic vein. Okay, portal vein, we all know that is formed by the union of the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein just posterior to the neck of pancreas. So this is the superior mesenteric vein. This is the splenic vein. Both of them join behind the neck of pancreas and go into the liver. The inferior mesenteric vein joins the splenic vein. So what is the normal anatomy of the portal vein? It is 6 to 8 centimeters long and it is 12 millimeter in diameter. It doesn't have any valves and the pressure is same. Because there is no valves, the pressure is equal in all parts of the portal venous system. It supplies 80% of the blood that is going to supply the liver, and gives 20% of the oxygen demand of the liver. You know what? That the remaining 20% of the blood that comes to the liver comes from the hepatic artery. Okay, portal system is very peculiar because it starts in the capillaries in the mesentery of the intestine and spleen and ends as capillaries in the liver. So we have to remember this. It is 12 millimeter in diameter. Whenever there is the portal vein goes about 13 millimeter, we can think it as a portal hypertension. So the term portal hypertension is caused by is introduced by Augustine Nicholas in 1902. Normal portal pressure is 7 millimeter Hg. When it increases to 10 millimeter Hg, which we call it as portal hypertension, and it can even go up to 60 millimeter of mercury. Okay, and there is a increase in the gradient between the portal vein and the inferior vena cava, which is called as the HVPG, that is hepatic venous pressure gradient. It is normally 1 to 5 millimeter of mercury. When it increases more than 10, equal or more than 10, it is called as portal hypertension. So the important thing is the hepatic portal venous gradient, which should be equal to or more than 10 millimeter Hg. So how do you classify portal hypertension? We classify it as the prehepatic causes, the intrahepatic causes and the post-hepatic causes. In the intrahepatic, we have the pre-sinusoidal, sinusoidal, and post-sinusoidal. We repeat again, it is the pre-hepatic, intrahepatic, and the post-hepatic. In the intrahepatic, we have the pre-sinusoidal, sinusoidal, and the post-sinusoidal. We'll see all these causes because cirrhosis with portal hypertension is one of the important cases for you in the final exam. It is an essay question and a lot of short answers will also be asked in this topic. And the causes, we should be very thorough on it. So pre-hepatic causes, it can be that is before the blood enters into the liver. We have the portal vein, the splenic vein, the spleen, everything. Any disease in these, any obstruction in this are causes called as pre-hepatic causes. That is the portal vein thrombosis, splenic vein thrombosis, or the massive splenomegaly also. So see here, there are various gradients of the pre-hepatic causes. Here the partial thrombosis in the portal vein. Here there is a complete thrombosis of the portal vein and total portal vein is obstructed. This is the superior mesenteric vein. This is the inferior splenic vein. This is the inferior mesenteric vein. This is the partial thrombosis, that is grade A. This is the complete thrombosis of the portal vein. Here we can see the portal vein thrombosis extending into the superior mesenteric vein. And here we can see the portal vein with the superior mesenteric vein thrombosis as well as the splenic vein thrombosis. So this is a partial obstruction, complete obstruction of the portal vein with the superior mesenteric vein thrombosis, portal vein with the superior mesenteric and the splenic vein thrombosis. These are the pre-hepatic causes of portal hypertension. So coming on to hepatic causes, it is pre-sinusoidal, sinusoidal, and post-sinusoidal. And the most common cause of portal hypertension, we all know that is the sinusoidal cirrhosis of liver. Okay. Pre-sinusoidal can be the schistosomiasis or the congenital hepatic fibrosis. Sinusoidal causes can be cirrhosis of liver or alcoholic hepatitis per se. Cirrhosis of liver, the common causes we all know, it's alcoholism, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and everything. And post-sinusoidal, it is a veno-occlusive disease where the smaller veins are getting occluded here. That is the post-sinusoidal obstruction. So this is the pre-sinusoidal. It is in the portal veins, we can see the schistosomiasis eggs here, obstructing the portal vein. These are the schistosomiasis. This is hyperview. We can see the schistosomiasis calcified eggs, which are blocking the portal vein. This is the pre-sinusoidal intrahepatic cause of portal hypertension. This is cirrhosis of liver, nodular cirrhosis. Most probably alcoholic or hepatitis B etiology. This is the veno-occlusive disease, one of the post-sinusoidal causes. See this is one of the larger vein here and the smaller vein here. See, they are totally excluded. These blue patches here are the hepatic fibrosis, the nodular fibrosis occurring here. This is the veno-occlusive disease, post-sinusoidal cause of intrahepatic portal hypertension. This is the larger vein with the narrowed lumen. Here there is a complete obstruction of lumen in the smaller vein. And coming on to the post-hepatic causes, that is which is past the liver. That is can be the hepatic vein or the IVC. Hepatic vein thrombosis, otherwise called the Budd-Chiari syndrome, and the inferior vena cava obstruction. Other cardiac causes, when there is a problem inside the heart also, the blood flow will be stagnated behind the heart from the right ventricle, where there is restrictive cardiomyopathy or the constrictive pericarditis or severe congestive cardiac failure, where the right ventricle is not able to dilate and receive the blood flow from the IVC and SVC, which can cause a dynamic obstruction to the IVC. So this is the Budd-Chiari syndrome, hepatic vein thrombosis. It can be sometimes it can be a IVC web which is obstructing the IVC web which is obstructing the hepatic vein, or there can be a thrombus in here. This is hepatic vein. There can be a thrombus or stenosis or web, or there can be IVC web also. This is the cardiomyopathy. This is the normal heart. This is the dilated cardiomyopathy, usually occurs due to ischemia, where the walls become thin and dilated in MI. This is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, where the walls are thickened and they cannot relax. The ventricular relaxation is affected, so it's not able to receive the blood coming from the atria into the ventricles fully. So due to that, the output is decreased. This is the restricted cardiomyopathy, where there is a innate disease of the muscles of the heart, where they cannot relax properly and receive blood from the atria. Okay. When this is not dilating properly, the blood is going to get stagnated in the right atrium as well as in the IVC and SVC, which can lead on to post-hepatic cause of portal hypertension. So moving on to the pathophysiology. So fundamental abnormality, what is happening? There is a resistance to portal blood flow. Why does this resistance occur? In cirrhosis of liver, there is a degeneration with the regeneration with the fibrosis and deposition of fibrous material. Everything is going to alter the sinusoidal flow inside the liver, which can lead on to the increased resistance to blood flow inside the liver. So there is a gradual reduction of blood flow in the liver, and when there is a reduction in the blood has to flow from the portal vein, from the liver to the systemic circulation. So the blood will try to search for other collateral vessels, leading on to liver, the blood bypassing the liver and entering into the systemic circulation directly. The collateral vessels will be used now. Initially, they won't be used because the blood is going into the liver via the portal system and going into the systemic circulation via the hepatic vein. But when there is an increased portal vascular resistance, the blood is going to bypass the liver and via the collateral vessels, wherever there are portosystemic connections, it is going to enter into that, and then it is going into the systemic circulation and it will bypass the liver. Because of this bypassing the liver, we will get a lot of manifestations of cirrhosis of liver. Okay, because of the increased resistance inside the liver, the nitric oxide synthase enzyme will be stimulated and there will be release of nitric oxide, which by itself will cause plaque vasodilatation and can cause increased cardiac output. So what happens in cirrhosis? There is a resistance to portal blood flow because of the fibrosis, regeneration, degeneration, and this myofibroblasts will be released, which deposits fibroblastic tissue there, and there will be endothelial cell dysfunction, and all these lead on to increase in portal pressure. So because of the increased portal pressure, blood will start try to go into the systemic circulation via the collaterals, which will lead on to the hyperdynamic circulation. So what are the portosystemic collaterals we know of? There are 5 actually. 3 are very important. The esophageal collaterals, which when increase will lead on to the esophageal varices. Rectal collaterals, which will lead on to rectal varices and hemorrhoids. And the paraumbilical varices, which will lead on to caput medusae. In the esophagus, the portal circulation vessel is the esophageal branch of the left gastric vein. This is one of the important MCQ questions, so please remember it. Okay, in the esophageal region, that is the esophageal branch of the left gastric vein, which is the portal part. The systemic part is the esophageal branch of the azygos vein. For the rectal varices, this when ruptures will lead on to hematemesis and melena. The rectal varices, it is the superior rectal vein which belongs to the portal circulation, and the middle and inferior rectal veins which belong to the systemic circulation. When these are enlarged, they can lead on to hematochezia. And caput medusae, it just dilated blood vessels around the umbilicus, which will be like the medusa head appearance. And this is the junction, this is the connection between the paraumbilical veins, which belong to the portal circulation, and the superior epigastric vein, which belongs to the systemic circulation. The other two collaterals are in the retroperitoneal area and one in the bare area of the liver. So see the collaterals here. This is the esophagus, esophageal collaterals between the left gastric vein and the azygos vein, left gastric vein and the azygos vein. This is the rectal collaterals between the superior rectal vein, inferior and middle rectal vein of the systemic circulation. Superior rectal vein is the, it's a branch of the inferior mesenteric vein. It is the portal circulation, the superior rectal vein. The inferior middle rectal veins are the IVC branches, so it is a systemic circulation. Here the azygos branch, azygos veins branch, the esophageal vein is the systemic circulation, and the esophageal branch of the left gastric vein, it is the portal circulation. And here the paraumbilical veins and the epigastric veins. The epigastric veins are the branches of the IVC, tributaries of the IVC, and the paraumbilical veins are the tributaries of the portal vein. This is the connection here. And the barrier of the liver and the retroperitoneal veins. These two are not so important. The esophageal, umbilical, and the rectal varices are important. So what will be the clinical features of portal hypertension? We know all the portosystemic connections are open, so there will be a caput medusae and splenomegaly will be there. Because of the splanchnic vasodilatation and everything, ascites will develop. The rectal varices will develop, and patient, because there is dumping of toxins directly into the systemic circulation bypassing the liver, lot of nitrogenous waste products including ammonia will be dumped into the systemic circulation, causing fetal hepaticus. And because of the hypoalbuminemia and everything and increased vasodilation, there will be a peripheral edema. So what are the investigations we'll do? We'll do a complete blood count for diagnosing portal hypertension. These are the routine investigation we do in any liver patient. It's you should see for a decrease in WBC, RBC, and platelet count because of the hypersplenism, and see for the hemoglobin and hematocrit levels. So whenever the patients are going to have a gastrointestinal bleeding like a hematemesis or a hematochezia, do a hemoglobin hematocrit, and do the liver function test, the INR, PT-INR, the prothrombin time, the bilirubin level and albumin levels, and do the hepatic transaminases, the aspartate transaminase and the alanine transaminases. The low-cost effective method to identify portal hypertension is the ultrasound. And by this we can do, it's a non-invasive technique. We can see the flow direction, we can see the velocity of the portal flow, and we can see also the collateral wherever it is formed. And we can see the, by ultrasound we can see for splenomegaly, nodularity of the liver, and we can also see the portal vein diameter. These are the methods. This is a very good investigation of choice to identify portal hypertension. And see, when the portal hypertension velocity is decreased and there is a dilated portal vein of more than 13 millimeter, this is indicative of portal hypertension. So what are the complications of portal hypertension? We have we also know the variceal bleeding, and also there will be a congestion on the blood vessels supplying the stomach, leading on to the recurrent gastritis-like features the patient will be coming to you. This is due to congestive gastropathy due to portal hypertension, and the patient will develop splenomegaly with hypersplenism. Hypersplenism is when the splenomegaly is going to destroy all your blood cells, it's called as hypersplenism. The treatment for hypersplenism is splenectomy, and ascites can develop because of the bleeding. The patient can develop iron deficiency anemia, and hepatorenal syndrome because of the alterations in the renin-angiotensin system. The patient can develop a acute kidney injury due to the liver alterations. That is called hepatorenal syndrome, and hepatic encephalopathy can occur because of the toxins entering into the systemic circulation. So this is the ascites. See that these are the esophageal varices. These are the varices. This is the upper GI scopy. This is the bleeding esophageal varus. See how much the blood is gushing out, and this can kill the patient. 25% of the esophageal varices bleeding the patients will die. 25% of the patients will die in the first instance itself. This is caput medusae, dilated blood vessels around the umbilicus, between the umbilical veins and the superficial epigastric vein. This is the spider angioma. Because the liver is not working properly, there will be hyperestrogenism, which will lead on to the vascular dilatation, arteriolar dilatation. This is the spider angioma. When you're going to press it, it is going to blanch and then it's going to refill. It occurs especially in the area of the SVC territory. This is gynecomastia because of the hyperestrogenism that is occurring in cirrhosis liver. This is one of the CT finding in cirrhosis liver. See the ascites here, a splenomegaly, and the small liver here. These are the gastric vessels which are dilated here. Small liver, enlarged spleen, and the ascites here. So what is the management of portal hypertension? It's just treat the complications of portal hypertension per se. So esophageal varices is one of the main complications of portal hypertension. So 40% of the cirrhotic patients will have esophageal varices, and 5% of the patients are going to develop a new varices every year. And the size of the varices are going to increase every year. And the incidence of variceal bleeding is 24% at 2 years in patients, and 20 to 25% of the patients will die in the first variceal bleed itself. So what is the natural history of variceal bleeding? When the hepatic venous portal gradient pressure gradient increases more than 10 millimeter of mercury, we call it as an increased portal pressure. This will lead on to formation of varices. And as the pressure increases, there will be a dilatation of the varices. When the pressure is the gradient is more than 12 millimeter, variceal rupture can occur. So by treatment, we can go back to decrease portal pressure. If the patient is untreated, they'll go on to rupture of varices causing a hematemesis. So we should start screening for varices. All cirrhotic patients should undergo upper GI scopy to see for varices, and which kind of varices are going to bleed. When there is near the gastroesophageal junction, that is near the gastric fundus, there is a more propensity of bleeding, and there is a grading of varices according to the size. The bigger one are going to bleed easily, and the appearance, that the red wale signs, that is the linear streak of blood over the varices, which means that is going to impending rupture is there, or bleeding has occurred recently. Those are the red wale signs. And variceal pressure, if it's more than 50 millimeter Hg, there is more risk of bleeding. See, this is the red wale sign, the linear streak of red patch over the varices. The linear streak of red patch over the varices. This means recently the patient has undergone a variceal bleeding, or there is an impending variceal bleed. These patients should be treated immediately. So how are we going to manage acute variceal bleed? Actually, how to manage acute episode, how to prevent a rebleeding, or what are the prophylactic measures to prevent the first hemorrhage itself. So prophylaxis is the beta blockers, the non-selective beta blockers, especially the propranolol. We have to give 20 milligram twice daily and maintain, because it's a beta blocker, it is going to decrease the heart rate and maintain the heart rate at 55 to 60 beats per minute. So propranolol, it's a prophylactic agent. It's not a treatment for acute bleeding. It prevents the further bleeding episodes or a first bleeding episode in a patient who has a esophageal varices. And we should do screening endoscopy every 2 yearly in cirrhosis patients. We have a esophageal varices. So if we have done a scopy now and there is no bleeding and we have started the patient on propranolol, after 2 years or 1 year, we have to repeat the endoscopy again to see for whether the variceal size is increased or any bleeding red stick sign is there or not. We should do it again. So initial management of the acute variceal bleed, start an IV access, immediately rush fluids and prepare for blood transfusion. And if already the patient is a cirrhotic patient where there will be a coagulopathy will be there. So start on vitamin K, and if there is thrombocytopenia, please correct it, because the thrombopoietin levels are going to go down in cirrhotic patients, as well as they will be having splenomegaly, which can lead on to hypersplenism. So correct the thrombocytopenia, correct the coagulopathy, start them on injection vitamin K, IV, not IM, IV, and start the plan for blood transfusion. These are the initial resuscitative measures. And pharmacological therapy is vasoactive drugs. You can give IV terlipressin, which is 2 milligram bolus with 1 milligram 4 times a day for 5 days, or give IV somatostatin 250 microgram bolus with 250 microgram per hour infusion for 2 to 5 days, or you can give an octreotide of 50 milligram bolus with 50 microgram per hour infusion for 2 to 5 days. So terlipressin, somatostatin, octreotide. The next thing is take the patient with all these. We have to definitely do an upper GI scopy and treat the varices. How are you going to treat the bleeding varices? Is you can do a sclerotherapy or a banding, or you can put a Sengstaken Blackmore tube. We can also inject adrenaline, which is the vasoconstrictor, which can decrease the bleeding inside the esophageal varix. So in this, the endoscopic sclerotherapy, they'll inject a sclerosant into the varices, usually ethanol oleate, which is going to thrombose the varix. And what are the local complications is, it can lead on to ulceration, it can re-bleed, and sometimes stricture can be formed if you are going to inject into the muscles of the esophagus. And sometimes you can perforate the esophagus and cause inflammation of the mediastinum. And it is not as a primary prophylaxis. It is only when the esophageal varix is going to bleed, we are going to do a sclerotherapy. Ethanol oleate is the sclerosant used here. See here the sclerotherapy. This is the syringe used to inject the sclerosant into the dilated varix, which is going to thrombose the varus. The blood is going inside the varix is going to get thrombosed, so there will be no further bleeding. This is the endoscopic band ligation. Okay, it's this can be used as a primary technique, or it can be used in a patient who is already bleeding. See the varix, they put a band inside the varix, so bleeding stops here. This is the endoscopic view. They are going to suck in the varix and put a band around it. This is a rubber band ligation. Okay. See all the banding done here, everything. So what is the management? There is a variceal bleed. Resuscitate. Maintain the hemoglobin around 7 to 8 grams per 100 ml. we have to definitely start on antibiotic prophylaxis in a variceal bleed. Give vasoactive drugs like terlipressin, octreotide, somatostatin. Take the patient for band ligation. And further bleeding is occurring, repeat endoscopy and do a band ligation again. If further bleeding occurs, put a Sengstaken Blackmore tube. If further bleeding occurs, go for TIPS procedure. So antibiotic prophylaxis, because all the bleeding are going to go into the intestine, where the bacteria is going to act upon it and increase the sodium ammonia production, which can lead on to hepatic encephalopathy. We should definitely start on antibiotic prophylaxis in a patient with variceal bleed. We can it should be given for 7 days. Norfloxacin 400 milligram BD or ciprofloxacin 500 milligram BD or 200 milligram BD is IV. Or we can give a third generation cephalosporin like ceftriaxone 1 gram daily. This is a Sengstaken Blackmore tube. It has a esophageal bulb and a gastric bulb. It is going to give pressure here, and due to the pressure, the esophageal varices are compressed and bleeding is stopped here. And this is only an emergency management. After this, we have to take the patient for endoscopy and do the further management here. So TIPS procedure, transjugular intrahepatic percutaneous techniques here. TIPS is a percutaneous technique. There is a connection between the right hepatic vein and the right or left branch of the portal vein, decreases the resistance inside the liver. And when the medical management and the endoscopic management are failing, we should do the TIPS. And what is the main complication of TIPS? Because directly the portal vein and the hepatic vein are connected, the liver is totally bypassed here, and that can lead on to hepatic encephalopathy. So transjugular intrahepatic portosystemic shunting. See here, the hepatic vein and the portal vein are connected here. This is the TIPS shunting. This is the last resort we use, not the last but one resort we use to prevent the intractable portal hypertension with variceal bleeding. Okay, after the TIPS, we have other procedures, surgical management like the shunt procedures and hepatic transplantation. Shunt procedures are the end-to-side portocaval shunt, side-to-side portocaval shunt, the large diameter interposition shunts, and the conventional splenorenal shunt. These are the end-to-side portorenal shunt. This is the portal vein. It is joined into the caval, the IVC. The portocaval end-to-side portocaval shunt. This is the side-to-side portocaval shunt. This is the portal vein. This is the IVC. These are the various shunts we can use. This is the mesorenal. This is the mesenteric artery. Actually, the mesenteric artery is connected to the caval to the IVC. The portal vein is connected to the IVC, and the kidney renal vein is connected into the IVC. Here, the conventional splenorenal shunt. Here, the splenic artery is connected to the renal artery. Splenic vein is connected to the renal vein. This is the conventional splenorenal shunts. All these shunts are trying to decrease the portal pressure, and they are directly connecting into the systemic circulation, which can lead on to hepatic encephalopathy. And the last resort is the liver transplantation. The orthotopic liver transplantation is the only method which will decrease the which is going to decrease the disease as well as in the cirrhosis, whatever disease the patient is having, and as well as it is going to decrease the pressure also. The portal, it is going to relieve the portal hypertension also. This is the last resort and the best treatment plan for the patient. Thank you very much for the class.
Thank you so much, madam. It was an informative session.
Thank you, ma'am. We can end this meeting, ma'am.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Students, if you have any doubts, you can ask now. Okay then.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay then. Okay.
Thank you.
Students, we shall see the next session at 6:30 p.m. on the topic CNS synapse by Dr. Sangeeta Patel from MGM Medical College. Till then, please stay tuned. And thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing your precious time to us.
And my pleasure, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, students. Thank you, ma'am.